So that's plants and animals that are specific to one geographic area. The Red Sea is a semi-enclosed basin in the northwest Indian Ocean, and it has one of the highest levels of endemism for marine organisms. So this wasn't in the paper, but I was like, why do we care about studying endemic species? Like, why is it important? And it's more to do about the conservation of these biodiverse species, as well as understanding the impacts of climate change and which species can survive in harsh conditions. So when you look back historically in species that have survived through different conditions, which ones survive and which ones don't, and why. So that's why it's important. And so this paper looked at why there's endemic species in the Red Sea and looked at the geographical, biological, and genetic history of the Mediterranean to try and explain why. So this is the level of endemism in the Red Sea. It's highly endemic, especially for the fish species. And this level of endemism is only seen, exceeded in anywhere else. It's most highest level of endemism for fish. And the only place that they've seen as high levels or higher for fish is the Hawaiian archipelago. So this is a quick history. I mean, they gave this in the paper, and I don't think it's super important to like have all the details, but it looks at the mega annum, which is like a period of 1 million years. So it looks back in history at all the things that have happened in the Red Sea. And it basically says there was a lot of change in this area in terms of tectonic movement, in terms of salinity, in terms of temperature. And there's also physical barriers in this area, which I'll talk to you a little bit more. So what they saw was that Red Sea reef fauna was established about 3 or 4 mega annums, so 1 million years ago, which is relatively recent because there's been so much change and movement in this area to like 31 million years ago. Okay, so there's different types of barriers when we talk about variability and speciation in an area. One of those barriers is physical. So on the left, you can see there's the Strait of Boab al-Manbab, and it's a narrow and shallow channel that's the only connection between the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean. So it's a very small channel that connects the two, which is one physical barrier. And then the other physical barrier is constriction at the Gulf of Aqaba. There's also another barrier would be temperature. So some people believe, and it was in the paper, that temperature is more important in terms of creating endemism than physical barriers. So in this area, there's a cold, nutrient-rich water barrier that separates the Gulf of Aqaba, the Gulf of Aden and the rest of the Arabian Sea. And there's also upwelling, which changes seasonally due to monsoons. So there's physical barriers and there's temperature barriers. So then they looked historically at evidence from history, paleontological, biological, and genetic to see which of these features and changes have occurred over time and which they think are most important in terms of endemism. So on the left, you can see they take samples of deep sea cores. They dig down into the sea, and those cores show biotic changes over glacial cycles specifically. And they showed an aplankton period. So in these cores, you can see where there's a period where there's like almost no plankton at all and almost disappeared, indicating super unstable environmental conditions historically, primarily associated to really saline, they call it hypersaline conditions. So in the Gulf of Aden, it may have served as like a refuge for Red Sea fauna in times of harsh conditions. So in the past, there's been really harsh conditions by hypersaline solutions could be caused by like high levels of evaporation or like when icebergs flood, and so it changes the salinity. And so in hypersaline conditions, the Red Sea fauna they were refuged in the Gulf of Aden. So in terms of biological indicators, salinity tolerances for marine organisms are different. And so in the Red Sea, salinity levels are 37 to 41 parts per thousand. Currently, biota in this area thrives at about 42, and they start to die at 45, and over 50, they pretty much don't survive. So during glacial maxima, salinity was 10 parts higher, specifically more in the north than in the south. So this elevated salinity basically corresponded with the disappearance of plankton in parts of the Red Sea. However, some tolerance to elevated salinities allowed some species to survive throughout these glacial cycles within the Red Sea, and that's how they became endemics. So these are some of the fish in the area, and the diversity of species shows that some species have persisted in the Red Sea even throughout the glacial periods. They took oxygen isotope records, and the occurrence of 5 periods of increased wetness in history. And when there's increased wetness, there's lower salinity, and it increases the chance of survival within the Red Sea. Because some of the paper looked at endemism within the Red Sea and between the Red Sea and other bodies. So again, the Gulf of Aden may have served as a refuge for local endemics during periods where there was lower sea level and hypersalinity within the Red Sea. Most of the endemics are actually restricted to the south portion of the Red Sea, presumably due to greater similarity between the environments. Fish, and there's 2 ways to look at this. So they can look at phylogenetic analysis. So that's basically looking at the evolution, evolution relationships among biological entities of coral reef fish. So that looks at the timing of the origin of the species, but they can also look at the distribution of the genealogical lineage, which is called phylogeography. So basically, the evidence from the genetic side of things suggests that it was periods of like inhospitable conditions in the Red Sea, but it was survived by some lineages. And the genetic divergence detected indicate that colonization of the Red Sea did not coincide with any specific geological event, but probably like multiple random events. So the conclusion of the paper was that fluctuations in temperature, salinity, and productivity all occurred in the Red Sea to produce endemic species. It's been an ongoing process in this region, and it was really hard to lock down like the exact reasons because there was changes in temperature, salinity, and geological movement. But the Red Sea, Gulf of Aden, and Arabian Sea is a lot more complex than they thought it was. There's also a limited water exchange between the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean at the Strait of Bab al-Mandab. And there was drastic changes in this environment because of the glacial changes. So yeah, the fluctuations in salinity, temperature, and physiological changes have all contributed to the endemism in the area. And from the sediment cores that they found, the loss of plankton is direct, This is apart from the sediment core, there's few locations indicating a loss of most of the planktonic organisms. There's also direct evidence supporting the complete loss of species. So basically during all the glacial periods, they don't think everything was completely wiped out. So there's been like lineages that have carried on even with like high salinity or high evaporation or geographical changes. And that is it. But also, I actually went snorkeling recently in Alat, and I saw some really cool fish, but a lot less than I thought there was going to be. So I feel like anthropogenic factors are probably the biggest cause of lack of species in the area.
Okay, thank you very much. Guys, any questions? Questions, anyone? No questions. I have a question for you. You mentioned the salinity, temperature, and also nutrient levels. What's the major cause, do you think, that that is changing causing endemism in the Red Sea? And what's the major thing that made the difference?
I think it's
You also mentioned the no, how's it called, the Bab el Mandab. So
yeah, I think it's the salinity levels. There was quite dramatic changes, or drastic changes over the glacial periods, and the temperature changes, even though there seemed to be like a barrier. I don't think it's a strong enough barrier, but the salinity changes seemed kind of the most fluctuating. And also too, like, it's like harder, like temperature changes sometimes are more gradual. And also too, there's like ways to migrate in different places, like down or up. But or like the Red Sea, like the east and the west is very different. But salinity, I think, was a big factor.
okay, that's great. I don't know if you guys are remembered, or I don't know if Boaz talked to you about this, but speciation, basically the creation of new species, is done in two ways. And the classical way is having a geological difference. And I mentioned it when I talked about fish with you. I think it was with you, I'm not so sure. But there's more species in the freshwater organisms than there is in the Red Sea, or the sea in general, because the sea is basically homogeneous, and different bodies of water are freshwater are different because they're all secluded, they're different, they're isolated. When you have isolation, physical isolation, geographical isolation, you have creation of new species. And basically that's the whole idea, is that the Red Sea is a relatively new ocean. It's evolving, and has, because of different glaciations, water has went up and down. Sometimes it was so low that basically it was almost completely separated from the main body of water. And then you have the salinity, the high salinity that you mentioned, which is a major factor. Many species didn't make it, and those who did were different. And then when they opened up, you still have new species coming back, and old species. The species were there, endemic species, and the other species which you can see that also are common in the Red Sea, not the Red Sea, I'm sorry, the Indian Ocean. And so I agree with you that the salinity is a major factor, but it's a classical way of looking at speciation via geographical differences. Thank you, Amy. All right, who's next? Invasive species. Was that Sagi? Who needs to be? I don't remember. Sagi?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple different ones that were pertain. There's two with Isaac did one, and then I did one.
Right. Okay.
Mine was on invasive species in the Mediterranean. I think Isaac did. Isaac, you do more biodiversity, I believe. I think he's here.
I did plastic hitchhikers.
Okay.
So let me get mine up.
But wait, I already presented, so.
You presented Dudi's class?
Yeah.
Yeah, I did too.
Oh. You did as well?
Yeah.
Who didn't present? Okay, so this is really confusing. Because Amy was supposed to present in Udi's class, and you guys were supposed to present in my class. So if you all presented,
yeah, I think what happened was during the actual invasive species lecture, Isaac and I didn't present, but we presented eventually on like a later date with Hudi.
So everyone presented? I just want to be sure. I have no idea, honestly, because I knew that I had two missing people on my list. And Amy, I knew that was supposed to be with Hudi, and she's not. She didn't present. Oh, what a mess. Okay. All right, so if you presented, I'm not gonna, so obviously Hudi heard what you said. We're not gonna repeat that, not for the rest of the class. That's fine with me. So if you know of someone who hasn't presented, let them contact me ASAP. So it's gonna be much shorter. Wonderful. All right, so let's go to the second part. We'll talk about the exam, and you guys give me some questions and things you're not sure about, and I'll try to give you the best answers I have. So the exam is going to be on this Thursday, 16th, 12 o'clock. It's an online exam on Moodle, and it's going to open up exactly on Moodle. We're going to hook up. What you have to do is we're going to send you a link to a Zoom. I think you've done this before, right? For me, it's going to be a first time, though. So we're going to send you a link.
No, we did it for bioengineering.
Okay, so we're going to send you a link, and the link is going to be for you to open the Zoom. The whole idea is that we're going to see you, and well, basically all we need to do is just verify you and that all of you are who you are, and also it needs to be opened up and to see that you need to put it's the best thing is actually put it on a small phone and put it on the side so we can see the computer and your hands pretty much. This is the regulations of what they have. And once we do that, so we're going to hook up about 15 minutes before time. So we're going to see everything that's fine. And at 12 o'clock, the exam, or it's called I don't know, it's called in Hebrew, it's Bochan, I think. I don't know how it's presented in your place. Quiz? It's written as a quiz? I don't know. Because my platform is in Hebrew, not in English, in Moodle. So it's the exam basically is going to open up at 12 o'clock. You have 2.5 hours, which is a very long time. And those who have extra time have extra 37 minutes. I don't think you're going to use it, but if you want, you have it. Other things that we have is, well, basically the exam itself is quite simple. It's multiple choice questions. It's there are 40 questions in the exam, about half of mine, half of Rudy's. And there's a bonus question, which is an open-end question. And since you're not going to get the final grade once you finish it, because we need to, and also the presentations that you did. And what you're going to do, you're going to have to answer not 40 of the questions, but only 36 of them. So I'm going to have to grade it by hand, unfortunately. So this is how it's going to be done. So you need to basically, out of the 40 questions, you need to answer 36 questions. And what you need to do is check out that you didn't answer not less and not more. If you answer more than that, we're going to take the first 36 questions, and that's going to be the mark. And basically this is it. I think it's a relatively simple exam. There's not too many tricky questions. I think mine is more tricky than Hudi's, and his is more straightforward. But there's no trick questions, basically. That's the whole idea. And we're not trying to make you fail. We're trying to make you go forward with everything. There you go. Okay, so I didn't go to, I'll get the chat. Hold on, Hani, you send me. Okay. So it's 36 questions that you need to decide which they are. They can go back and forth on the exam. Regarding the open question, there's a bonus question that can give you 5 extra credit points, 5 points. Even if you get the whole thing, you're not going to get more than 100. So don't come and say, I got the extra 5 points. And it's 105. It's not. Okay, you cannot go more than what you can. So it's really to help you out. And I think, I don't think it's a trick question. There are no trick questions. I think it's relatively straightforward. The best thing I can tell you, it's a pass or fail. I think you're right, honestly, but I still have to make the numbers. Yeah, I know, but I have to make the numbers for the university. So I'll give you the numbers. I think it's a pass or fail. I don't remember.
Why is it pass or fail?
Why?
Yeah.
I didn't understand what you said.
So why is it pass or fail? Because it used to be right.
Yeah, I honestly don't know. There's a decision. It was a decision that made, and I think it's just to go and help you out. I think it's easier pass and fail rather than doing the whole thing. I think because of the whole Zoom thing, the Corona, everything which was not organized. I think we were not organized, and we're not feeling comfortable with this, and we do want you to be successful. And I think it's fine. It's fair for you. This is the idea. Eventually, when we want to.
Did you mention? Oh, sorry.
I know.
Did you mention that we had to have Zoom on our phones for this?
Or a phone or something. You need to have an external camera, making picturing you or filming you as you take the exam. That's the rule. So if I were here, I would have a camera here on the side, and the camera needs to point, and I'm going to help you out. It needs to point on the computer screen and your hands, basically.
So what if you're someone like me who has a very limited space phone that can't get any other things on it?
You have an external camera?
No, I just have the webcam here. That's all I have.
Just the webcam. We'll survive. Okay. You promise not to cheat, right?
Promise. Yankee promise.
Okay, we'll see how it works. I'll have to discuss it with
And
someone.
why is it 36 questions?
What?
Why is it 36 questions?
Well, it's actually because this is what we usually do. That was the original plan, and the pass and fail, I forgot about it, and you're absolutely right. If it is like that, maybe it's going to be 40 questions. I'm going to discuss this with Udi, and I think maybe 40 will be better than 36 if it's a pass and fail. So since I forgot that, you're going to have the regulations, the instructions before you start. Read the instructions before, and you'll also have to sign out that you're not going to be cheating. So it's part of the deal. We believe you. You're responsible adult people, and we think there's an honors code, and the university is very. We believe you as an adult person, but if you're going to realize that there's going to be some cheating, the university is not very nice. So this is how it works. Okay, so it's your turn. I'm going to see a little bit on the chat what you wrote, and
can I ask a question, like outside the logistics of the exam? Like going through the material, there's like a lot of like definitions, and like it's like very, very detailed. And I'm curious in the exam, like, do we have to know like if we learn the definitions of like pretty much everything in the course, like that's a lot. That's like a test of memory. So I'm curious, like, are the questions more going to be about, is this the right definition or wrong definition, or like, is it more about like the interactions?
Well, I'm going to give you an uncomfortable answer. It has both, and you're going to have to learn some of the definitions. It's going to be the major definitions and not the tiny ones. But think about the important things, the important factors that are changing the environment. Let's give an example of something. If I'm going to take the paper that you mentioned just now. So according to this, for what you presented, things which are important for this is change in temperature, salinity or salinity levels. So you can have haloclines and thermoclines. You can have physical barriers, which is these are the things. Do you understand? These are the major things. We're not going to ask you on very small species that you talked about. We're not going to ask you about examples. And it's going to be, if there's going to be example, the example is going to be serving a purpose of an idea, not necessarily the example itself. You understood? All right. So
yeah.
This is the general idea. So the major things that are major players. So it's going to be, we'll talk about water properties and what's going on with the Mediterranean Sea, maybe a little bit of the Red Sea. You talked about, was it corals, mangroves? I'm trying to remember. Various marine organisms. What's it called? The intertidal zone, right? You talked about intertidal zone. So you don't need to know exactly if there's internal fertilization in although we talked about when we were outside, between the barnacles, and the barnacle is not important, but maybe zonation is a concept. You understand what I mean? Okay, so this is the idea of what we're talking about. So if you're talking about an idea, what's the major ideas that were presented? What are the major definitions that can help you understand the concepts of the subject that we taught? And nonetheless, even though I'm saying that, if there's a end, what I call the end questions, could be some end questions, some need to know questions, or knowledge questions, basically, from memory. Did you mention types of questions? Sorry, I didn't understand that, Jacob. Oh, okay, so it came late. Okay.
But there's
Okay.
only going to be one correct answer, right?
There's only, yes, only one correct answer. There's going to be four answers, and one of them could be correct, the correct one. Some are very similar, so this sometimes could be the best answer, but it's going to be best by far. And some of them are going to you have to mark the wrong question, or these kind of things. So be careful when you look at it. There's some bold things that remind you that you're supposed to be answering the wrong question and not the right answer. And yeah, there's always the opposite of that. So read the questions now before you answer. And my suggestion is read them at the end very quickly. And even if you don't know, guess. Don't leave anything open. If you need to answer 36 or 40, we'll give you a final remark about it later on today. Do the whole thing, even if you don't know. We really don't care if you guessed and you got it wrong, or you know what you're doing. It's not personal. Okay, that's what I'm saying. It's not personal. And this is my suggestion. Anything that you do, by the way, with exams, it's not. We don't take it personal. So you don't need to feel that I did a dumb question. I don't know about it. It's fine. We know you're not dumb. You know you are very successful, upbringing people. So don't worry about the exam. Nobody's gonna remember the exam a week from today. Yeah, your turn, guys. Specifics, questions, ideas that you want, concepts that you think that you want to remember, that you want us to explain again. Okay.
I know there was some confusion about the presence of Hoody's lectures on Moodle. I don't know if that was ever resolved.
I think all of them are there.
Oh, are they?
Correct?
Or
I don't know.
I don't.
Who's
this is
there?
the last I heard that they weren't there.
Okay, so what I suggest is, Max, if you can find out exactly which ones are missing, we're gonna upload it today. If there's anything missing, I'm gonna do that.
I don't know which ones exactly are missing.
You have the syllabus. You have the syllabus. Can you check out for us, and just to be sure?
He means the recorded lectures. He doesn't mean
the recorded
PowerPoint presentations.
Yeah.
The recorded. Okay. So we talked about the recorded, Max, and if we'll find them, we'll point it out to you. I don't know where they are with these questions. I'm sorry about that.
Right. No,
I thought the physical question, the physical lectures. Any questions? You know everything. Which one? Do you know anything which was unclear? Was not? You don't know perfectly. You're not comfortable about it. Anything that you want me to repeat from my part?
Honestly, yeah. Only it's from your part, and I mean it's pretty simple. I mean, you have the recordings as well to go over things. I'm not sure specifics for me, but I mean, I can't really give any questions about Hoody's class because I don't really. It's all either technical terms or.
If you have technical terms, if you have any technical terms, that's fine. Shoot, this is the time to do it.
I'm not sure whose class it was, but like a little bit of the relationship between corals and mangroves. like how they
Corals,
stimulate each other and like
right.
what the
Okay.
benefits are.
Okay. So, who did talk about mangroves? I'm not sure what he talked about. Mangroves they're found almost all of them in warm conditions. There's about 50 different species. Out of them, about 35 species are in a vulnerable state from conservation point of view, and their importance for ecological purposes is usually it has a few. One of them is that they're found in just between the mainland, basically like marshlands. Basically, it's on the edge of the sea and the land. So if they have any runoffs, the runoff usually, if it goes to the area where you have mangroves, and usually it's a thick forest, it usually reduces the stream of the water, and then it cleans the water relatively well. So one of the things that it does, that the water that goes into the sea is cleaner. That's one of the things which is the benefits. The other thing, which is from ecological point of view, which is very important, is this a nursery for fish. A lot of fish like to start their lives in nurseries where there's many of them have nurseries. There are two kinds of nurseries usually. One is seagrasses, the other one is mangroves. And in places where you have mangroves, it becomes the second place. Usually organisms that live there, fish, at least specifically fish, they come and I talked about this. There's a relationship between areas where you have mangroves and corals not too far off, meaning a coral reef, which is a few kilometers away. And if you have a mangrove not too far away from it, what happens is the fish, first of all, when they lay their eggs, the beginners will come, the recruits, what we call, will come, the larvae will come to the seagrasses, which is kind of in the middle, then will go and spend their young juvenile state in the mangroves, and then they're going to go all the way to the reefs. And what they found out in areas where there is and there is not, is areas where they don't have it, they're just going to skip. There's only seagrasses, and they go from the seagrasses directly to the reef. They found out that the fish in areas where there's mangroves, some species, not all of the species, are much more, the diversity is a little higher. And most importantly, the biomass is very, very large. Meaning there's much more fish. Amy, we went snorkeling. Okay, there's much more fish in areas where you have mangroves not too far away. So basically, the beginning of their life is a major part for fish. They die very quickly when they're young. They're being eaten, predated on. So it gives them a refuge, and then the survivorship is higher. Okay? Wonderful. Good question. Come on, let's see. Caroline, any questions? Daniela? You have to have some questions.
I'm looking through my notes.
Oh, let's do plankton, okay? Let's start with mine, plankton. Let's see. Can you tell me 3 important things about plankton?
Can I read from my notes?
Yes.
It is responsible for 50% of the Earth's atmospheric oxygen. It is an important factor in biogeochemical cycles, and it is the base of marine food chain.
Food web. Okay, wonderful. Yeah, okay. We don't talk about plankton too much, and we did specifically, but generally people don't talk about it. They're very important for the marine system. And we talked a little bit about this in Israel, that we don't know a lot about this in Israel, specifically in the Mediterranean Sea. It hasn't been monitored very well. And basically what they do, the major part of it is what we call the primary producers. Primary producers are the phytoplankton. Basically it's plankton, which is a plant, and it has photosynthesis. And they are responsible for the 50% of the oxygen of the earth, but also for the beginning of life, or the food web, the beginning of the food web in the oceans. And they're very, very important. Now, what they're related to is that since they're a plant, basically, what you need to have physical conditions to make them survive. The physical conditions needs to be light. It needs to be carbon dioxide, which is very evident. You can have it on the top part of the ocean surface, not too far away from the surface, and also some nutrients. So in areas which are very clear, like the Red Sea, there's not too many nutrients in the water. It's very clear, and the water is beautiful and nice. But since it's so clear, we don't have a lot of phytoplankton. Basically, you have a lot of phytoplankton. You usually have what we call an upstream or upwelling. And when you have these areas of upwelling, what you don't see is you don't see corals, because corals need light. So the water becomes murky, and usually the corals don't survive. Many of them also they come from the bottom with a very cold water, and corals don't like cold water. So you don't see them in areas where there's a lot of where there's upwelling, where there's a lot of nutrients, and the water temperature is relatively low. Also, that means that everything that we have at the beginning of life is only the top part of the ocean, because you have light, and you have the conditions of both light and nutrients, and also carbon dioxide, which can be available, and it usually comes from the atmosphere. So what you find is in phytoplankton, you find phytoplankton only in the top part. But there's a but. What happens to corals? How can corals survive in an area when there's no nutrients? They have algae, right? You know, remember they have zooxanthellae?
Symbiotic relationship with algae.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So how can they make it in an area where there's hardly anything? I mean, this is what we call the paragas, so the reef. Go to where what Vidya said. You have this relationship. What's the relationship? Do you remember the relationship? Symbiotic relationship.
Don't the algae give the coral nutrients? The nutrients offer and the coral offer protection.
Right, but it's not complete. Can you complete that?
I just remember about coral bleaching when they
I have written prey-predator relationship.
No, don't go there. Go about the symbiotic relationship. The symbiotic relationship is really cool. I'm going to explain to you this. It's very nice. What it is basically the algae, the small algae, the zooxanthellae, they're dinoflagellates. They live inside the corals, inside the cells of the corals, to be specific. And what happens is that the coral is given protection, which is right, but it also respirates and defecates, meaning it excretes ammonia, and the ammonia itself is the ammonia itself is part of this is the nutrients which is missing in the water. So that's what happens in the oligotrophic water. Where do you get the nutrients? You get the nutrients from the coral. Carbon dioxide by respiration by the coral, and a little bit from the outside as well. It's not no big deal. So it gets everything it needs for photosynthesis inside the coral. What it gives the coral is basically food. And the coral is happy, and it grows faster, and they live together happily ever after until there's coral bleaching. Right? You remember what happens in coral bleaching?
Yeah.
There's like, okay, go ahead.
Oh yeah, the temperature rises, and so it stresses the algae out, and they then excrete from the little things inside, leave the coral, and therefore it's left white. And it usually takes 2 to 4 weeks, around 3 weeks of like the heat stress staying at that level before it completely removes itself from the coral.
Right. Yeah. It doesn't take too long actually, much less than that. It takes a few days for them to leave the coral, but the coral can still survive. And the coral itself, usually the color of the coral is transparent because it needs to transfer the light to the algae inside. But once the algae is not there, which gives it the the common color of the green, brownish, yellowish color, mainly yellow, brown. And what you see is the white, and the white what you see is the skeleton inside, which one the coral itself is depositing. Now, this is the trick. This is the whole idea about this, is that if they don't come back within a certain amount of time, the corals eventually will not have enough food. They supply about 70 to 90% of the food for the coral. And so it needs to eat by eating, by grabbing and eating. You can do that. He has nematocysts, remember, right? Like all the cnidarians have nematocysts, and they can fire them and grab the phytoplankton, or not the phytoplankton, the zooplankton, and bring them into their mouth and eat them. But they cannot survive only in that. They're not adapted to do that. So they can survive for a few more weeks, and if it doesn't happen and the relationship is not going back to normal, they'll eventually die, and then you're going to see dead coral. It's going to be with macroalgae growing on it. Usually there's no way back. So this is the story. And the reason is, why do you have bleaching?
Increased sea surface temperatures.
Exactly. By how much? Do you remember?
Like the percentage or like the degree?
No, degrees.
1 degree.
It starts about 1 degree, exactly. But 1 degree, usually 2 degrees above of natural ambient temperature. And we talked about, I don't know if you remember that we talked about the 2 degrees that everyone's talking with the IPCC. And it's not just a made up number. We talked about us as humans, if we had to increase our temperature by 2 degrees, that would be very detrimental for us, obviously for other organisms as well. So if it reached about 2 degrees above sea level for a relatively long time, just the organism cannot survive at this temperature. His enzymes are not going to function. He's going to die eventually. Okay?
But I don't completely understand if it's the coral itself that has the problem or the algae with the temperature.
It's the coral. It's the coral that has it's a combination of both of them, basically. What happens is when the temperature goes high, and nobody knows exactly how this works, when it goes high for a relatively long amount, the algae produces oxidative, forgot the word, hold on a second, free radicals. And they're oxidative. Well, what they do, they start fusing with, reacting within the chemicals within the coral. And the coral doesn't feel comfortable, okay? And basically spits them out. You know, and when he spits them out, this is basically the end of the relationship. He would like to have some nice algae living inside him that's working with him and not against him. Nobody knows exactly how this nobody knows exactly how this works, and a lot of people are working on it, and there's very slow progress in that. And we know a lot of the stressors, which kind of stressors, and the combination is usually between. And now we have talked about ocean acidification. We talk about also how they combine together, the pH levels and also the temperature. But salinity is also a major deal as well. Not as big as the first 2 factors. And people want to know what will happen in the future. And this is what they do with the different experiments and trying to realize what will happen to corals in the future. We know that the future is already here for corals.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
When like people talk about coral bleaching, I'm just wondering, like, do they mean like when the algae is expelled from the coral, or is that also including like when the coral dies?
It's the first situation when they get expelled from the coral. Basically, a bleaching event is reversible only if the algae comes back.
But does it ever come back?
It's rare. It happens. That's been recorded, but it's rare. It's usually a one-way situation, because it's very uncommon to have something warm and then it will just disappear and temperature will be perfectly fine, and maybe new, and nobody knows, by the way, how the algae reaches the coral. It's never been recorded, only in lab outside on the field. It's never been recorded. We never found Zeus and Tele in the water. It's really weird.
What happens to the coral after it's expelled? Like, have they monitored like where it goes, or if it dies, or if it's eaten?
The coral? I'm sorry, I didn't hear it.
No, the algae. Like when the after coral bleaching, when the algae is expelled into the water, like what happens to it then?
What happens to the algae? Nobody knows. Nobody knows. No, we never found the algae in the open water. Basically, what they do is they filter water. And to what I know, from my knowledge, which is I haven't touched this for about 5 years or so, I don't think they ever found these algae swimming in the ocean or next to corals. The only thing we did is we played with them. We played with them in laboratories. You play with them. You can take them out and let them grow their flagella, and then you can grow them, and then basically reinfect or re-inhabit a different coral or same coral. By the way, there are different kinds of what we call clades. They're not all the same. Some say species, some say not. Species, clades. We're not sure if it's different species or subspecies. Okay, good question. What about ocean acidification? You guys are comfortable with ocean acidification? Yeah. Can someone explain to me the whole concept? Why is it important?
Because it dissolves carbonate-based structures, so things like corals and shells like disintegrate in acidic water.
This is exactly right. This is the major concept. There's a lot of organisms that have shells in the ocean, usually for protection. And obviously corals, which are the biggest calcifiers in the ocean. And this is a big threat to it. And I showed you some evidence of corals, and I showed you the first evidence. There's been has been reported again that corals are slowly the rate of their calcification has gone down in the last 20, 30 years, so even more. And we believe it's because of the increase of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Basically, since the Industrial Revolution, you see a slowdown in the growth of corals. We've done that by digging into them, taking out pores. You can see that. I'll show you a bit about this. Yeah, so calcification is a major deal, and ocean acidification is a big problem with them. And also remember that ocean acidification if it increases carbon dioxide, it increases also the growth of algae, because for photosynthesis you need to have carbon dioxide. So if you have more carbon dioxide, you're going to have increased algae, and this coincides with the thing that I talked about in fisheries. I don't know if you remember, we talked about the importance of herbivores in the system. You remember that, guys? And so the idea is that one of the major things which people believe is very important is having a good and healthy, not only top predators of fish, but also herbivorous fish. And the idea about that is that the herbivorous fish, they eat the algae. And when they eat the algae, they have space for other organisms to thrive and grow on, like corals, which need space. And obviously other organisms. Corals is a big deal. So if we're going to have fisheries which are going to be reducing the amount of herbivorous fish, and some of the fish that we like to eat, like the sea gannets here in Israel, are relatively small, about this size. They're really nice, very tasty, and people eat them. That means now there's less herbivores. If there's less herbivores, there's going to be more algae. If you have ocean acidification, there's going to be also better condition for algal growth. So we're going basically in this, we're going in a state from changing from what we call a reef environment to eventually what Jeremy Jackson called the rise of the slime. Basically, having a state of algae rather than corals.
Well, that's also occurring in the Mediterranean now, but just through
Yes.
like invasive species with like a lot of herbivorous, like I know in my presentation, a lot of herbivorous and invasive species coming from the Suez Canal. They're starting to fill up those vacant niches, which is what I was talking about in my presentation. And pretty much they're sort of, they're fueling and sort of acting as catalysts in sort of that energy flow throughout those trophic systems. And it sort of help start fueling better growth and better growth within those systems that they've integrated into.
The whole idea about invasive species is that we don't know exactly what's the ecological impact of an invasive species, since they're relatively new to the system. This is one of the things where we're really afraid of them. And by the way, it happens in every system, not necessarily a marine system. And the invasive species that you talked about, and they have competition with local organisms as well. And when that happens, sometimes they compete and outcompete in a very good way, and they change the ecological balance. And we're not sure exactly how it will change because we have a lot of invasive species, not just one or two or three.
Yeah, I'm saying specifically within like the rocky coastal regions of like where the Israeli is, where there's less herbivorous species. I know exactly what you mean about the competition, and that's where like the biodiversity issue and native species. But I guess that what I was trying to say was when there are the lack of herbivorous fish species in a certain system, I was saying that the point I was trying to make was that in some invasive species have ended up filling that role that you were just explaining.
Yeah, and changing the what we knew before that. We're not sure if that was the original or the healthy, I would say, environment. So the ecosystem is changing. Yeah. So one of the major deals about invasive species that they're changing the local environment, they're changing the ecosystem, and as scientists, we don't like to have these changes because we don't know exactly what will eventually be the end condition. Doesn't mean necessarily that it's maybe it's a natural process. Maybe it's supposed to be like that. I don't know. But good comment. All right, let's talk about invasive species. Let's do my stuff. Okay, invasive species. So we talked about invasive species. They have different ways of traveling from one place to another. You can either do it naturally, which is not basically, it's hard to say invasive. Only if it happens very quickly, then it can be invasive. And you do see some natural organisms going from one place to another, basically invading it by their propagules. Remember the plankton, they have a planktonic stage, and then if the plankton reaches a place where they can actually survive there, they can actually establish themselves there and become local. And what we saw that we talked about various ways coming from either a natural way to for man-made implementation of invasive species. So we talked about ballast water, if you remember, and hitchhiking, which Isaac did, right? Isaac did some hitchhiking on organisms, hitchhiking on various things floating in the water, like plastics, or anything that floats in the water, and anything that moves in the water. You can have an organism taking a ride and going from one place to another. And we also have people that bringing them from one place to another, from the aquarium trade. And we talked about Taxifolia, if you remember, which was it's in a seagrass that was introduced in Monaco in the western part of the Mediterranean Sea. It's a big story, and it reproduced very quickly and basically outcompeted anything there. And they're toxic, especially when you eat them. So the organisms living next to them had problems surviving. And we talked also about an example, which was a very successful example, which happened, the same thing happened in San Diego, California. And we saw how they realized very quickly and they were able to eradicate Taxifolia. And I showed you as an example because it's an extreme example. We almost never see an example like that. almost all the time when we see invasive species, we usually find about it too late. And then what you need to do is usually not eradicate it, but try to manage it. And management is very, very difficult, also very expensive, and it's time consuming. Extremely, extremely difficult. But invasive species in the marine system happens exactly the same as it happens in the terrestrial system. It goes pretty much the same. What makes a species invasive? If you were an environmentalist or you were an ecological scientist, and someone comes and tells you, listen, we're going to bring this organism, is it okay? Ask you. Why not? Some species are okay, some are not. What makes a species invasive?
But I think it's hard to predict. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Amy, go.
Oh, it doesn't have like a predator in the area, which means that its population can kind of go out of control because there's nothing to control its population. I guess unless it's like fish, but like no natural way to control its population. Remember, it's not native to the area.
So basically, you're saying it has no competition. That's why it can thrive very easily and disperse itself.
Exactly.
Okay. What else?
I think also depends on the biodiversity in the new area. If there's a lot of species, there's a bigger chance that there are competing species, and then the chance that it will take over is a little bit smaller. And also the like how fast they reproduce. If they reproduce very fast, then also there's a bigger chance that they will take over.
Right. I mean, there's some properties. So part of the what makes an invasive species is not necessarily it's also the environment which has been introduced, but it's also the properties of the organism itself. I'll give you an example, a terrestrial example in Israel. We have a lot of eucalyptus trees, and you probably see them as areas where there are groves of eucalyptus, and has been here for, I don't know, 150 years, something like that, less, about 100 years. And they've been brought from where? From Australia. So they're not local. Are they invasive species? Okay.
No, I don't think they don't really create problems for other organisms, right?
Right, they don't. There's another one, which is an acacia, which you've probably seen before. It looks like you can see it very close to almost every place in the middle of Israel, right next to the roots, next to almost any road. And that's an invasive species, also not local. And that's an invasive species. You can find it almost everywhere, and it hasn't been transplanted in that area. It just reproduces and produces and produces. And they're staying in the same area. Both of them were brought to this place. One is non-invasive, one is not. One is. So one makes an invasive species an invasive species. You understand what I mean? It's not only the location. There's also properties which you started mentioning. So one of it is the ability to reproduce, and how fast they reproduce, their size.
I think basically when like an invasive it like becomes a problem and like detrimental to the natural biodiversity when it's pushing like endemic species out of the niche that they usually occupy, and is like out competing endemic species for like the niche that normally belongs to them. And also because invasives have to be brought to a new area by humans, and that's like a difference between like, I guess, species migration to new areas and like invasives is that usually humans are involved in getting them to the place that they invade. Yeah,
that's pretty much correct. And it's not the definition, but the exact definition of an invasive species, but the idea is of bringing invasive species as an organism which has been brought to an area which is historically is not related to that area. That's one of the definitions. There's various definitions, but generally speaking, an invasive species is a species which is relatively new, grows very fast, reproduces quickly, and usually is a nuisance. Usually a nuisance. So we see invasive species as a bad, from a ecological point of view, we see it as a bad situation. Okay, what else? Fisheries. You remember fisheries? Let's get some fisheries.
Yeah.
There's a lot. Oh.
Oh, sorry.
Second time. You go first this time.
About like fishing methods, like the worst and the best, and like
Yeah, what do you say? What's the worst?
I thought it was like how it's called, trawling, something like this.
Bottom trawlers. Bottom trawlers, okay? Usually they're not, by numbers, they're not the biggest, because there's many other ways of fishing, but they get a lot of fish. They go to deeper areas. Today they even go beyond the 600, 700 meters, 800 meters. It's not common, but it happens as well. And what it is, the bottom trawls, they just run on the bottom, and basically anything which is there is being taken inside the net itself. And there's a lot of bycatch, and a lot of these organisms are going to be brought to the surface, and then they're going to be dumped back to the sea, dead, obviously. So we didn't talk about bycatch. I don't think we had time to talk about bycatch, but it's a deal, and if we didn't talk about it, it's not going to be an exam. But definitely important. So they're very important. What they do is usually from a conservation point of view, what they talk, and in Israel, by the way, it's relatively new. This is the third year I think they're doing this in Israel. They're paying the trawlers, fishermen. They're paying them for the time that they're not fishing in the ocean. Usually about 3 or 4 months during the reproductive season. So the whole idea is to have the reproductive organisms reproduce and then reintroduce them back to the system. It's difficult to work with fishermen. They're really nice, but they're nasty. I don't know if you ever met one of them. Have a nice cup of coffee and enjoy them. Have great stories, but they're not very good for the environment. Other questions that you have? Fisheries.
Can I just ask also a question about like the papers that were presented? We don't like specifically have to know content from those papers, right? Like I know a lot of the concept was addressed. We also talked about in the lectures, but we won't have to know the papers specifically.
Right, it's just concepts. The main idea is concepts. We're not going to test you about the things you presented, but the concepts that you talked about, many of them were talked about in class, and they're basically reiterated, and they put emphasis on specific examples of things that happen. As we talk in a broad sense, and then you give examples on things that happen in certain locations, and that's what makes it really interesting to see. So the concepts are important, but not the details. Okay. Thanks, Olivia. Fisheries, no? Remember, one of the problems with fisheries is today is there's overfishing. You remember overfishing? This is the biggest deal we talked about. There's a huge number of overfishing, and if you remember what the CPU is, anyone remembers?
Catch per unit effort.
Yeah. Can you explain what's the deal about catch per unit effort when we talk about overfishing? How it's related?
It's like it measures like the relative abundance of, or like the relative measure of abundance.
Yeah, but it's
of
it's
fish.
per effort. That's the idea. The idea about this is catch per unit effort is that if we are, if about, I don't know, 50 years ago, we used to go fishing and we had one boat, it was a small boat, and we caught, let's say, 1 ton, which is a lot of fish, targeted fish. And today, when we go out with the same fish, same boat on the same setup, we'll get maybe 50% of what we did before. So if we still want to catch the same amount, all we need to do is we need to be better, technologically better. So maybe we'll get a bigger boat. Maybe we'll go out further out. Maybe we'll stay longer, out in the sea. Maybe we'll fish deeper. And maybe we have more technology involved, depth sounders. Maybe if it's for tuna, they have airplanes flying above them and finding the usually dolphins, and below the dolphins, they know that there's tunas. And these are all efforts. So if you increase the effort, you're supposed to increase the amount of fish. So that's how much you catch. So that is the catch per unit effort. And what they realize is the catch per unit effort is going down. Basically what you're doing is you're investing a lot, and you catch about the same. So you're spending more money, and you catch about what you did about 20, 30 years ago, about the same amount, because there's no more fish in the water. Remember that? One other thing yeah, Amy.
I was also, there was like a link to a video that was talking about how there's like limitations to the size of the fish you catch. So like you shouldn't catch the juvenile fish, but then you're catching like the bigger fish. But then actually it means that the smaller fish, because it doesn't necessarily mean age, it could also be like genetically smaller. So the smaller fish end up breeding. And then like over the past, like however many years, like 30 years, the fish size of the fish populations have actually gone down because we're catching the bigger fish, and then smaller fish are breeding. And so the overall size of the fish population is also going down.
Yeah, the whole idea is that originally, and if you're from the States, you definitely know that people, they used to have a size limit. You can catch a fish, needs to be bigger than an X amount, depends on the species, because if you catch a smaller one, they want it to get to the reproductive state, so in order to give them a chance to reproduce. Nonetheless, there was also a reduction in the amount of fish, even when you have this situation as well. So they came up with a different system. Rather than catching only big fish, is catching X amount of big fish, X amount of medium, X amount of small fish per species. Depends on the species. And that way, you don't get the system to be either small or just small organisms or large organisms. And basically, it's better effort in conserving the amount of fish. By the way, it's debatable. So people are still debating about this. But this is a better system. I think it's a better system than the old one. The problem is to change what people got used to. It's very difficult to do that. And also many people, fishermen, they don't have anyone to enforce any of the rules. So go out to the sea and you quickly bring it back. And if in the United States they have they're not bad with it, but people are very easily to have two places. They stick them in different places in the boat, and you can easily do that. So this is one other thing. Remember we talked about, by the way, we talked about the sustainabilities. What's the maximum sustainable yield? Remember that? And we talked about a little about this and the concept of the tragedy of the commons. Anyone remembers or wants to say it, tell me this, or you want me to go over it? If you remember,
it's like yeah. I mean, tragedy of the commons is like when everybody participates in taking a resource, and then over time, if enough people take it, there's no more of that resource to be used, so you deplete it.
Right, because it's a common property. No one owns the fish. It's out there in the ocean. Right. So if it's a public commodity, people would like to get as much as they can. And this is exactly what happens in fisheries. Now, the maximum sustainable yield is actually fishing not how much you can, is actually below what you're supposed to be catching. And even if you do that, even though your potential is higher, eventually you're going to have more fish over time. So the maximum sustainable yield, which people usually don't use, okay, it reaches a certain point where you actually, let me remind myself, I need to remind how it works. All right. So there's a catch, there's how much you pay for it. Maximum sustainable yield is a little less, as far as I remember. The amount of how much you spend, the effort is less than what you actually were supposed to if you were a little bit by yourself. I'm not using it the right way. Basically, you're not going to catch as much. It's best if you catch a little less than what you're supposed to be, or you can by effort, and to get as much fish as you can if you were just by yourself. What happens is most people, they'll catch as amount of fish more than their effort. Actually, as long as they can get extra amount of money, even $1, they'll do that. This is by theory. And what they do, they fish beyond the maximum sustainable yield. Even though their effort is going to be expensive, and they're going to spend a lot of money on running the ship, they'll still go out and ship and get food. They'll get the fish, even though if they're fishing less and their effort was less, then they could have gotten less money, but because their effort was less, eventually more money than what there is there. You understand? I kind of confused myself. You understand what I meant? No.
Yeah, I was fine.
Okay. I think that you understood.
It's not about like how much money you make, but the profit you make. You would have a bigger profit if you invest less, but it doesn't work if everybody thinks that it's gonna finish and there's the competition between people.
Exactly. So because there's competition, eventually they're gonna fish more than they're supposed to, even though it's not economical for them. They'll do that because they're still gonna get any money. Because if I'm not gonna take the money, someone else is gonna take it. That's the way you see it as a personal fisherman, and that's why you fish beyond what you were supposed to, even from a profit perspective. At least you're gonna get something, and not being left out. So this is the common tragedy of the commons. That's why you go and fish beyond your maximum sustainable yield. It's not sustainable by money-wise. It's not sustainable to go beyond it. Still do it. Okay. Anything else we need to remember from Udi's lectures, guys? Ask me questions from Udi's lecture. We talked about corals in Udi's lectures, right? Coral reefs. You remember how a coral reef is built? There's various where the coral reefs found in the world. 3 different kinds of coral reefs: fringing reef, atolls, and Great Barrier Reefs. Barrier reefs, not Great Barrier. Barrier reefs. What's a coral? You understand what's a coral? No?
Yes, very small animals actually, that like polyps that group together. They have a lot of the same ones. They have actually clones, and sometimes they have like, how you call it, like sprawl also, that they, I forgot the name, but that they reproduce sexually, but it's like at some one time, and then like this is how you get like a diversity.
Yeah. So they have 2 modes basically. The corals, when they reproduce, usually it happens when temperature is relatively high, usually during summertime, and also the length of day is relatively long. They use these 2 major cues, and also the moon. They know exactly what's happening with the moon, and usually it happens about 3 or 4 days after the full moon is they start reproducing. nobody knows exactly how it is, probably by scent. And they all reproduce. In Great Barrier Reef, there's about 150 different species that reproduce in one night in February after full moon. And it's just amazing how big the diversity is of doing it in one spot. In the Red Sea, for instance, there's also these, I guess, these mass orgies, but they're not as big. And you can see them just separated within the months. And there's a nice paper not too long ago, by the way, I don't know if you mentioned about Tom Schlesinger, that talked about the difference between, and it's actually interesting, his father did his PhD on the squirrels, and he did his PhD on the same squirrels as well. And he found differences between his father's work and his work, which tells you that something bad is happening, and the synchronization is slowly disappearing in the Red Sea. So the synchronization is important. And then you have the corals, they grow, they spawn, everything goes out, and then they meet and reproduce out there in the water. They form a planulae. The planulae swim inside the plankton, what we call meroplankton. And if it has a chance to go back to the reef, you'll swim out very slowly, look for a nice spot to settle down. And if it's the right spot, and they use this chemical sense to feel if it's right or wrong, and they have some, usually some substrate which are more comfortable in, they like it better than others. What they'll do is they're gonna metamorphose and become what we call a primary polyp, and eventually then it's gonna clone itself to become a coral. All right, so that was a repetition. What else? Corals, coral reefs. So you know where you find coral reefs, right? I told you before.
Are you talking about the coral triangle?
What's the coral triangle, maybe? Can you tell us?
It's like in like the Singapore region, I think like Philippines, Papua New Guinea, that area.
Right, and what's unique about it?
I think just like the environmental conditions are just so that there's like it supports like this hot spot of corals.
And this is what we find exactly. In the coral triangle, we find the most diverse coral, the highest coral diversity. One of the reasons is that the conditions are very calm, relatively calm. Temperature is very, very nice. And also there's a lot of islands there, and the islands geographically are different from one spot to another. Then you have speciation, as we talked before, in the Red Sea. So that's one of the game players that creates high diversity of corals. Okay, wonderful. What else? I don't know if a Moody's part, you have to tell me.
I don't even know which lectures Hootie did anymore. I have no idea. I thought Hootie did like the earlier ones, and then you did the later ones.
It's exactly right. He did the earlier ones.
Okay. Well, I don't know where his start and yours began, really, off the top of my head.
Mine started with plankton. The first one I produced was plankton.
I just know that the last lecture, I was a little bit confused about. It was first about technical diving, and then about ROVs and MCEs, and there I was a little bit like, didn't really remember.
Okay, so we're talking about mesophotic zone. A mesophotic zone is an area which is an awkward area, hasn't been discovered, hasn't been tested or observed for many years because it was an in-between area. It's called a mesophotic because the area it's relatively deep. Usually it starts around 60 and goes to 150 or something like that meters below surface. It depends where in the world, and it's where the light is very, very dim. It used to be called the twilight zone, and basically you didn't observe that area because it's interesting because it's a transition. It's in a transition area between a light area we call the PAR, photostatic active radiation, where you can have organisms do photosynthesis. And when you go deeper, light is not usually strong enough, and they don't have a lot of organisms that do photosynthesis. And that's an area where the light is actually diminishing. it's really interesting to observe this area, and it hasn't been used to be observed before because of technical reasons. If you had a submarine, you'd go deep, much deeper, and if you were a scuba diver, you used to go usually no more than 30 meters, 40 meters. Usually that's the maximum. And since the technology has evolved and they started observing this area much more, especially in the last 15 years, and much more, has given a much more attention. And usually by either technical divers, they used to go deeper to about 100 meters, maybe a little more. The use of ROVs, remote operating vehicles, either for just for taking pictures. It's tailored usually. It's just you know what an ROV is, right? And it's basically you have a joystick and you just play with it, and it has a camera you can see, and it records everything. And also some of them have also some hands that can actually collect stuff. And usually that's the way people do it. That's how they observe the mesophotic zone. And a lot has been attention has been given to that in late years because of the special conditions that it exists. And I found some places it's found that they exist and they survive better. The resilience is better than coral reefs in the top part, just because the conditions are more stable. It's still not exactly, we're not exactly sure how, if this is a good statement to say for all the reefs or not. But this is the general thought. Still evolving. Let's see what happens in the next 30 years. Remember the MC, can you remind me the MC, what it means? Can you remind me?
MCE.
What's the acronym for?
Didn't write that down.
I've got mesophotic coral ecosystems.
Was it mesophotic?
Coral ecosystems.
Okay. So I like all the mesophotic zone. Okay. That's fine. Guys, you have to have questions.
I'm looking over my notes. I think I think I understand it. Is there anything else about while we're on this topic of deep marine habitats, is there anything else about is the deep reef refuge hypothesis?
Yeah, that's the refuge. That's what I told you about a second ago. That's the refuge, that the idea that these organisms can actually go deeper and then survive the more stable conditions in the upper surface. And other thing which is important for us is when you go really, really deep, like real deep ocean, not the mesophotic zone, is that like deep oceans. First of all, that you see a huge reduction in the number of organisms. There's not too much there in the deep. It's basically dark, completely dark. And also the amount of plankton that reaches that area is very, very slim. So basically the food chain, the food web is reduced dramatically. So you don't see too much life. Those that you do see are really interesting because their modification has been changed completely. And one of the biggest problems that organisms have when they go deeper, especially if they're not spawners, if they're reproduce internally, is to find mates. And it's a big challenge when you go down to the deep because you don't see anything. And then they make these different kinds of flights and different kinds of sand and some modifications for just like a large female and a male which is attached to the female, which is tiny and basically does nothing but reproduce. These kind of weird things happening in the deep. I don't know if we talked about this or not. It's interesting.
Right. Well, it seems like in those deeper zones, there's there's different temperatures which can affect reproduction. So and so there's different things, different features like that would make it hard to reproduce for these more shallow adapted species.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I'm not sure how really effective those deep sea sites really are for shallow creatures usually.
Well, the refuge idea that you talked about, is that what you're mentioning?
I'm not just, I don't think, well, wasn't it like disproved that like it's not really useful for those species that are coming from a shallower
I believe you talk about fish and not corals.
Yeah, fish. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know some papers that talk about this idea that fish has escaped to deeper waters. What happened is that you see some areas which you can see them only in shallow areas, some areas you can see them in deeper areas. Basically, they just spread out much deeper. And I think it's more of a theory rather than a conclusive mark, like a fact. And even if it is, this whole Mesophotic area and the deep is very unexplored. So it's very difficult to come and say this is what's happening in general. So if it's localized. You need to have a lot of papers repeating the same idea in different places, different locations in the world to come out with a strong statement that will say this is what's happening. But it's a theory that people talk about since the beginning of finding these organisms in the deep. I don't think I'm not so sure, but I don't think it has been proven. I think it's still theory. Whatever they told you, that's the one you need to remember. Is that it, guys?
What is chemoautotrophy again?
Chemoautotrophic? Okay, so most of the organisms that live in the ocean, they use what we call photoautotrophic organisms, meaning that the energy that's running actually this whole ecosystem comes from the sun. Photo is light, so photoautotrophs, and photoautotrophs are, if it's autotroph is food, auto is making them by themselves, so photo using light to make food by myself. Chemoautotrophs is using chemistry to make food. So basically, if we have phytoplankton that are photoautotrophs, if you go to deep areas in the sea, in some places, what we call the mid-Atlantic ridge, for instance, which is about 4.5 kilometers deep, you can see seeps of really hot, relatively hot, not lava, but gases that's coming out from the Earth, from the inside of the Earth. And these gases have chemicals that they can be used to create organic matter. So even if there's no light, there's still energy because of the heat, and there's also chemicals which can be used rather than photosynthesis, meaning carbon dioxide and water becomes sugar. It's going to be different or different kind of chemical reaction that will eventually will create an organic matter, which is a little different than the one that we know of. Then you have the beginning of life. You have complete life ecosystem there. That's the energy is coming from Earth, from inside the Earth, and not from light. It's really interesting, and it hasn't been. It's the first time we discovered around 1975.
Cool, thank you.
Okay, guys, if you have any questions, you can drop a line, ask me a question, whatever it is. I'm gonna still give you an answer, complete answer about either 40 questions, pass fail, 40 questions or 36, because I just forgot about it. And that's it. And we'll see you in the exam. Cheers.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Have a
Thank
good one.
you.
You're welcome.